Baked alive by extreme heat while trapped inside an industrial bread oven, two hardworking men faced a nightmare almost beyond human comprehension. What started as a simple maintenance task turned into a real-life horror that would haunt a town forever. On May 16, 1998, at Harvestime Bakery in Leicester, United Kingdom, 47-year-old David May and 43-year-old engineer Ian Erickson were assigned a job that should have been straightforward, but instead cost them their lives. Their task was to retrieve a fallen metal grid that had slipped from a conveyor belt inside one of the bakery's massive industrial ovens. These ovens were essential to the bakery's operation, producing thousands of loaves each day for customers across the region. Regular maintenance was critical to ensure the ovens functioned safely. However, that day, a choice made to save a few £1,000s would end in tragedy. Dennis Masters, the factory's chief engineer, decided not to contact the oven's manufacturer for help. Although experts could have safely handled the issue, Masters believed it would be easier and cheaper to fix it themselves. May and Erickson had never performed maintenance inside the oven before. Still, Masters thought it would be a basic job. It was a deadly mistake. Harvestime Bakery relied heavily on its three massive ovens. Each one was a giant, stretching 20 meters long and 3.3 meters wide. Inside, a complex conveyor system carried trays of bread dough through a searing tunnel where the heat reached 260 degrees Celsius, or 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The oven resembled a long metal corridor, packed with moving machinery and layers of intense heat. Dough was placed into metal tins, which rode on top of a metal grid along the moving belt. The design left very little room for anyone to climb inside, making maintenance work extremely dangerous even on the best days. When the grid fell off inside Oven B, immediate action was needed. If left unattended, it could have caused more mechanical damage or started a fire. Masters chose May and Erickson for the job. May was a general handyman who worked on the factory boilers. Erickson was an experienced maintenance engineer with over 2 decades of service, particularly with bread ovens. The original plan was to turn off Oven B before the bakery closed at night, allowing it to cool overnight. It normally took between 8 and 10 hours for the temperature inside the oven to drop to a safe level. Without enough time to cool, the interior could remain dangerously hot, enough to cause serious burns within seconds. If the plan had been carried out properly, the tragedy could have been avoided. However, somewhere between closing time and morning, something went terribly wrong. Bread Oven B had not been shut down as intended. It continued operating throughout the night, baking bread for the morning deliveries. At 9 a.m. the next morning, a worker realized the mistake and quickly switched the oven off. By that point, the temperature had only dropped for 2 hours, before May and Erickson arrived to start the maintenance job at 11 a.m. It was nowhere near safe. No one communicated this danger properly. No one took the time to double-check the internal temperature. Management knew the oven was still dangerously hot, but chose to take a shortcut. Large fans were placed at the oven's opening, blowing cold air inside in a desperate attempt to cool it down faster. It was not nearly enough. May and Erickson were ordered into the oven armed with nothing more than thin, standard-issue work suits and simple walkie-talkies. They were given no protective heat gear, no backup crew, no safety line, and no proper emergency plan. The seriousness of the risk was either ignored or horrifically underestimated. Inside the tunnel of metal and fire, the air remained scalding. While the entrance might have felt cooler due to the fans, the middle section of the oven stayed at around 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the boiling point of water. In such conditions, human flesh can begin burning almost instantly. As they moved deeper inside, the two men began to realize the horror they were facing. Ian Erickson was the first to cry out. Over the walkie-talkie, his desperate voice rang out, pleading that it was too hot and they needed to get out immediately. Panic swept through both men. Yet there was no escape. The conveyor belt inside the oven moved in one direction only. There was no emergency stop button, no manual override. The design, meant only for baking bread, had become a death trap. The men could not turn back because the moving conveyor made it almost impossible. The intense heat scorched their skin, seared their lungs, and robbed them of breath. Outside the oven, their colleagues listened helplessly. There was no protocol for what to do. No one had prepared for anything like this. For 17 unbearable minutes, David May and Ian Erickson were dragged deeper into the blistering oven. Every second, the heat broke down their bodies. Their thin suits offered no protection. Their muscles weakened. Their lungs burned. Their strength failed. 10 minutes after entering, Erickson's voice was heard again, this time more frantic, more broken, begging someone, anyone, to get them out. Moments later, both men fell silent. They collapsed, overcome by the heat and exhaustion. Even if they had reached the end of the oven, it would not have saved them. The return path on the conveyor had only an 8-inch clearance, far too narrow for any human to escape through. They were trapped from the start, doomed the moment they entered. When their co-workers finally realized the full horror of the situation, it was too late. Factory workers rushed to the oven's end. Erickson's body eventually arrived, jammed at the exit. Using a crowbar, workers pried open the gap wide enough to pull him out. His body was covered in severe burns, bruises, and massive skin loss. They tried CPR, but there was nothing anyone could do. David May suffered an even worse fate. He became entangled in the machinery inside the oven. Firefighters had to be called to cut and pry him free. By then, May had burns covering 80% of his body. 2 families lost their loved ones that day. 2 men, who went to work thinking it would be just another ordinary shift, died in the most agonizing way imaginable. All because of a chain of preventable mistakes, shortcuts, and reckless decisions. Dennis Masters had gambled 2 lives to save the company a few £1,000s in fees. He lost far more than he ever imagined. But the full extent of the company's failure would only be revealed in the months and years that followed. An official investigation was launched, uncovering horrifying facts about Harvestime Bakery and its management. Ian Erickson's autopsy revealed he died from circulatory collapse due to heat exposure. David May's autopsy confirmed that he succumbed to injuries from burns, machinery entrapment, and extreme heat. The investigators discovered that there had been no proper planning for the maintenance job. No risk assessment had been carried out. No reference to industry safety standards had been made. No backup team had been prepared. Workers had been given no protective equipment. The culture at the bakery was described as dangerously casual when it came to safety. Profit was placed above human life. In a rare move, prosecutors decided to pursue charges not only against the company, but also against its top executives. John Burden, the chief executive of Fresha Bakeries, Brian Jones, the production manager, and Dennis Masters, the chief engineer, were all charged with breaching health and safety laws. On July 17, 2001, they stood before Leicester Crown Court. Each pleaded guilty to the charges, yet none of them received a prison sentence. John Burden was fined £20,000. Brian Jones and Dennis Masters were each fined £3,000. The company itself faced a much heavier penalty. Fresha Bakeries was fined £350,000. The fine was meant to send a clear message to corporations across the country. Safety was not optional. Fresha Bakeries tried to appeal, arguing the fine was too high. They claimed they had improved safety after the accident. They even said the fine would hurt the company's financial position. The court rejected every argument. Judges made it clear that financial hardship could not excuse the loss of 2 lives. The company had failed its workers in the most fundamental way, and it would be held responsible. The deaths of David May and Ian Erickson became a chilling reminder of what happens when companies cut corners and treat safety as a burden instead of a duty. Their names would live on as symbols of the human cost of corporate greed. If you found this story powerful, do not forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories that deserve to be heard. Your support helps keep these important stories alive.